Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for today's OSDFCon webinar. We are really happy you're here, and today we are talking to Bob Kardell, who's talking to us about LogParser as a forensics tool. Give me one second. Here we go. Sorry. Before we get started, I am going to introduce myself. My name is Allie Duveen. I'm the event manager here at Basis Technology, and I am mainly here just to run through some logistics and also just try to make sure that all your questions are answered. If you have questions anytime during the presentation, you can definitely ask them throughout, but most likely they will be answered towards the end during the Q&A session. To submit a question, just type it into the questions pane of the control panel. This webinar is being recorded, and we're going to email out the link tomorrow to everyone who registered. So if you find it useful and informative, please feel free to share it with anyone who might be interested. We scheduled the webinar for 45 minutes, so after a very brief introduction from me, there's going to be roughly a 30-minute presentation followed by Q&A. And if you would like to download the slides right now, you actually can download them via the handout section in the control panel. Now, when the webinar ends, you'll be directed to a survey, and I always do a plug. Please, we would really appreciate it if you just spent a couple minutes letting us know your opinion. We really do read these, and it helps us learn what you thought of this webinar and what you really want to see in the future. As mentioned before, I work for Basis Technology. We've been around for 25 years, and our cyber forensics team focuses on building easy-to-use software for the people who are on the front lines of cyber investigations. So we built Autopsy, which is one of the most popular open source digital forensics tools in existence. And we also make a tool for incident response called Cyber Triage, which is really hyper-focused on intrusion-related investigations, and it automates as much of the process as possible. Now, without further ado, let's get started. I want to introduce you to Bob Kardell, who's been working in computer forensics for over 20 years in both the government and in the private sector. He retired a few years ago and now works at a law practice called BAIRD HOLM, where he helps companies recover from cyber breaches. And a fun fact about Bob is in his spare time, he makes some pretty beautiful pens, which are much fancier than any of the pens that I own. And Bob, if you wanted to show somebody one of the pens, you should. So if you appreciate a good pen, Bob is your go-to for that as well. So thank you. I love them. So thank you so much for being here, Bob. I'm gonna hand it off to you.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I appreciate the opportunity. I will tell you that I started with computers and computer investigations back in about 1997, 98 when they stood up the first computer crime squad in Chicago. And then shortly thereafter, I started doing computer forensics. I've been doing computer forensics for quite some time now, but I don't do it 100% of my time anymore. In fact, it's a very small part of what I do anymore. My last few years in the FBI, what I was doing was managing a white-collar crime squad, and then what happened was all of the white-collar crimes now, when we go out and execute a search warrant, what we're actually doing is executing search warrants for digital data, wherever it may be. So I still kept my hands in computer forensics as I went along, and I still use computer forensics a little bit in my practice of law now. As I said, I don't do it all the time, but what happens is from time to time, I will come up against a case where it's only a single computer or a single telephone and a single cell phone. And then what I'll do is I'll do the forensics image of it and then do the analysis myself. So part of what I'm going to be talking about here today is a tool that I came across when I was doing a intrusion investigation on a computer probably about 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago now. And it really helped me in the process of trying to figure out what was going on with the computer. And so I wanted to kind of present on the issue because I think it's a quick, easy tool. It's a quick way to kind of discover what happened. It's a quick triage sort of tool that you can implement in addition to all the other forensics tools that are out there. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Uh, so just to talk a little bit more about my background. So way back when the computers, we used to go out and we used to grab a computer, and we could grab the whole computer, we could grab the laptop, we could grab whatever it was, we could take it back to our lab and we could image it, and we had a lot of time to go through it, a lot of time to go through the free space, the slack space, try to find it and cover all those little digital bits that may be evidence in an upcoming case. But now what we do, and now what I've run into quite a bit, is I don't have the opportunity to go out and grab the computer or grab the hard drive or grab whatever it is that I need and take it back to a lab. So a lot of times what I'm doing is I'm doing stuff on site. I'm trying to do it quickly. I'm trying to do it efficiently, and I'm trying to make it as cost effective as I can for the client. Um, and so uh, uh, part of what I do just as an attorney and trying to do computer forensics, because it's kind of a question I get quite a bit about what's an attorney trying to do in the computer forensics realm. And it really comes down to what I'm trying to prove as an attorney to help my clients in terms of the legal theories as to what we need to show or what I need to get off the computer to help my client decide what their next steps are going to be. And what I mean by that is the state data breach notification statutes, and every state has one now. South Dakota and Alabama were the last two to pass them. South Dakota passed theirs in 2018, and Alabama passed theirs in 2018. And so those were the last two states. After that, every state, and including the three territories, have some form of data breach statute notification. So if we look at this state data breach notification statutes, what I'm trying to determine is what are the key terms that I need to figure out when I'm doing the investigation in order to counsel the client as to what their notification obligations may be. So if I grab a computer in Nebraska, for instance, what I'm looking for is, under our statutes, a breach is defined as the unauthorized acquisition of data. What that means, what I take it to mean, is somebody's actually physically taken that data. They're not just accessing it. They're not just getting on your system, but they're actually acquiring that data. Iowa has a very similar statute. So if I were to go over and grab a computer in Iowa, I'd be doing the same sort of analysis on it. Florida has quite a different sort of statute. They actually have the unauthorized access language in their statute. That means there's a much lower bar to before a client has to actually provide notification to the individuals whose PII or PHI may be on their system. So in Florida, if somebody just gets on that system, we have to do notification. Massachusetts, I'm just throwing these are just a few examples that I put up here on the screen. So Massachusetts, the unauthorized acquisition or unauthorized use. So that's a little bit different now. So now you've got the unauthorized acquisition or use, and how do you prove use? You may not be able to prove use by looking at a computer. That may be something that occurs down the line when somebody takes out a loan or a credit card in somebody's name using their social security number, that sort of thing. So in Virginia, we're looking at the unauthorized access and acquisition. So they have to do both of those things in order for somebody in Virginia to have to provide notification to their clients. So to kind of tell you a story as to what happened and how I got onto this tool, this was a computer of a client who had clicked on the wrong link, and they got one of those codes that said, click here, we'll help you manage your computer because you seem to have a virus. And they knew better, but it was worded in such a way that they clicked on it anyway, believing that they were contacting a help desk of a prominent bookkeeping organization, software company, let's just say that. And once they clicked on it, then it opened up their computer to remote access, and the attacker actually came through, got on the desktop, started moving some stuff around. And once they realized what was happening, they shut down the computer immediately, and then they called me and kind of walked through everything that happened. And so what I was trying to do was I was trying to go through the computer and I was trying to figure out, hey, did they actually get on and acquire any of the data? Did they just access the system? What did they do while they were on the system? Did they install anything? And so that was the kind of information that I was looking for. And at the time, what I did was I took the hard drive out. It was a SD card. It took the card out and imaged the card, and then I actually used, I think it was Autopsy, to go through it, look for some stuff. But when I plugged it back in, I was looking for a really easy way to go through the event logs and try to figure out what was going on. And I wanted to marry that up with kind of the file system and figure out whether there were any files that were touched during the time. And so as I was going through doing a bunch of Google searches, I came across LogParser. And just to give you a little bit of the background on LogParser, so LogParser was put out by Microsoft back in the early 2000s, 2001. So apparently this was an internal tool at Microsoft for several years. And then they finally opened it up to the outside world because so many people internally at Microsoft are using it and thought, what a great tool. So you can still go get this tool from Microsoft. It's up to version 2.2. The download site is there on your screen. So you can go download it, install it, and use it and practice it. But there's also a lot of how-to web pages out there. There used to be a whole user group on Microsoft hosted page to talk about how to use the log parser, because quite honestly, it's a little bit complicated to use. The idea is fairly simple, but to try to get it to where you're fairly proficient at using it can be kind of difficult, and I can show you why here in the next slide. But there are a few resources out there. There's still some people that have their websites that talk about how to go through LogParser, how to use it. There's even a book out there on Amazon on this that was published way back in 2005. The book itself, I think you can get it used now off of Amazon for about $6. I actually bought a version of the book, and the print was so old, the ink was starting to fade on it, but you could still read it and go through it. But the reason why the resources are so important is because of the fact that LogParser is a command line tool. And as a command line tool, it has a number of different options. It has a number of different logs that it can use to parse through. It has a number of different output formats that you can view as you're going through it. And up here on the screen, I just kind of put just a snapshot of some of the help information that's in the file itself. And you can see here all the different input formats that it has. So as IIS W3C logs, IIS logs, it has CSV inputs. You can parse through a CSV file using the log parsers if it were a SQL database. TSV files, but the big one that drew me to it was that event log file, the EVT, and it also does EVTX files. Then what happened was I was going through this file, trying to parse through some of the event log files that were on the machine, and I found out that LogParser actually does parsing through the registry as well, which is pretty neat. So I knew that the registry had a last write time in it before, but I didn't know of any tool in which you could actually use or actually query the last write time to figure out what had changed in the registry over the last couple of days, which I thought was awesome. I was very excited about that. And then I also found out that it does file systems. So the FS there is the file system. So you can actually give it just a root directory, point it to the root directory, and tell it to go grab everything that was changed in the last couple of days, and it will put it out for you. And it, as in talking about the output formats, you can either drop it to a CSV, a TSV, or a data grid. It actually does charts as well. The chart system is sort of a Microsoft's old technology. I forget the name of the technology right now, but it was back when late 2000s when Microsoft had a charting function that you could use to interop between Excel and some of their other programs. But you can drop it out in any of these formats. So just a quick query. So I can give it just a SQL-like query. So select all into, and I put into grid, so it drops it down in the grid down here. And and I'm just going to grab the Windows prefetch file here and put an asterisk after it so it grabs everything. My input is a file system. My output is the data grid. And all I do is hit enter and it puts out this data grid for me. I can also, instead of select all, I can move any of these fields around so I can actually sort it by last access time, creation time, last write time, whatever it is I want to do, which I thought was pretty cool. So then what I could do is I could take all that information and run a sort of time analysis over the registry, the file system, and the event logs, and drop them into a CSV file, and then kind of see what happened over that time frame that I'm interested in. Just to kind of move along here quickly, so I can do a file system query by date and time, and this is where it gets to be really complicated. So if you want to do your date and timestamps, you have to get it exactly right. If you don't do your date and timestamps exactly right in the query, you don't get any results. So your queries can run on for quite some time, or quite a number of lines. It does have the ability to ingest a file, so you can save all your queries to a file if you want, and then just run those queries out of that file. But what I found is that you have to run all the same type of queries out of that file. So it's got to be all file system queries, or all registry type of queries out of that file, or it starts to get kind of confused as to what type of query you're doing. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know that this tool was ever meant to do sort of a forensic analysis like this, so I don't think they anticipated somebody trying to run a bunch of different queries out of a file for a bunch of different systems. But you can see here what a file system would look, or a file system query would look like if we try to put some date and timestamps on it. So the complexity around LogParser kind of spawned a new version of it. And it's called the LogParser Studio, and it was put out by Microsoft as well, but it's much harder to find. You have to kind of Google and to find it. It's an old version as well, but it's a pretty neat version if you can find it. What it has, and this is a kind of a screenshot of its interface, what it has is a whole library, in this first tab, a whole library of queries. And so this is where I really started to get excited about using LogParser for forensics, because what they have here are a bunch of sample queries that you could use to go into either the event log files or the file systems or the registry and look for information that's in there. So instead of trying to write these queries myself, and believe me, I spent quite a long time trying to get the queries just right, because they say it's supposed to be like it's a SQL-like query, and it is a SQL-like query, but it really is kind of finicky. But I found this Studio, and I was able to put all this stuff together. So the Studio has this pre-developed set of queries here, and you can see how complicated it is just to look for external logins out of your event logs. But it is pretty cool once it works. And LogParser Studio even has a batch function up here where you can throw a bunch of queries into a batch file and it will execute all of them as well. And then you can take these queries themselves and you can create your own queries off of it. So I believe in this particular instance, we can change the event ID to something else. We can, you know, if I wanted to do my time over a different period, I could change my time, just create my own log files, and I can save them back to my own library, so I can have my own library of queries to go through it. Again, I think this is a neat way to do it. And then in going through it, and this is where I really, I mentioned earlier, I was able to find out that you can actually query the last write time of the registry value. So now I can go back to the registry of that computer that I was talking about, and I can say, hey, what did he install any systems? Did he, you know, what was in the shell bags? What did he do when he was on the system? And just look for that last write time, and it may help narrow down my search and save me time trying to figure out what exactly was going on. So again, what I started to do was put this together for file system forensics, registry forensics, and event log forensics. And by doing the three of them together, I was able to go back and figure out the files that they had touched, the files that they had opened, the files that he had reviewed. I was able to actually figure out that he had not exfiltrated any data. There was no data acquired off the system. I did that with the help of the managed service provider as well, who had the firewall logs to just add another kind of hook to hang my hat on to say, hey, look, I'm not seeing anything, and their firewall isn't seeing anything going out of the system. But it's a great tool without the need for having to process everything in there. You can really concentrate and focus your efforts just on what you want to find, just on what you need to find to be able to find your answers. So it's a great triage tool. And you can create your own library of things to run. But, and this is where I get kind of into the second half of my talk here, what I ended up doing was I ended up finding that somebody had created a event log tool online using the LogParser and the DLL that is embedded in LogParser. And it was no longer being maintained, but it helped quite a bit. But it set me off on this quest to try to figure out how to export the library out of LogParser and use it for my own VB.NET sort of program. And so what I did was I ended up exporting that DLL out of LogParser, and I ended up importing it into my, what I'll call a VB.NET wrapper for LogParser. I call it my intrusion response lab, but basically it's just a big wrapper around LogParser. And in here, it provides a GUI interface so that you can put your root folders in there. You can filter your dates. You can filter your dates by your creation date, modification time, or your last access time. So you can do any one of those three, and then you can output that information to a grid. You can copy the files off if you want to do more analysis of those copies. So if you find that they were in a system for a couple hours and you want to look at the files that were dropped on that system during that time, and you happen to find them through this method, you can copy those files out and then do some further analysis on them. You can also capture the ND5 in here. So this is kind of, I extended the features of LogParser to be able to create and capture that ND5 and put it in a grid for you. And then we can actually use some of BASIS technologies and Sleuth Kits, open source tools out there like HFind to actually run a quick hash value match against the index file, whatever index it is you want to use. and figure out very quickly whether those are known files or unknown files. And so again, it's just a big GUI wrapper around the log parser, but what it means too is you don't have to, the way I set this up is when you launch this program, it automatically installs, not installs, but it registers the DLL for you, so you don't have to install LogParser on the system. And then it automatically unregisters the DLL when you're done with it, when you close it out. So that means you can go into somebody else's system, you don't have to install anything. You can open up the studio, you can run it, and you can execute some of these searches. So I'll move quickly through some of these other features here, but you can do the event logs. What I ended up doing was creating a bunch of config files that are all just text files that automatically feed into all these drop-down combo box menus. So when the program starts up, all of these are pre-populated for you. And the program will actually go down to the Windows System32 WinEvent log directory and put all the log files that it finds in that directory up in this file text box for you. So you can quickly grab one like security and say, I want to search for everything that happened during a certain time. And I can search for the event log itself. And again, this part of it is a text file as well. So you can add your own event logs in there. If there's something that you're looking for, you can add them to that text file. You can move your event logs up in the text file if your events are more interesting to you than the ones that I have. I think mine are just sorted by event ID number. But then we can output all of that to a grid, and then we can go through the grid, sort it by the time, and figure out what changed in the event log over that time frame. We can do the same thing with the registry files. These are actually pre-populated as well from a text file. So we can put our registry entries that we're interested in into the text file. Next time you open it up, it'll be pre-populated in here for you. I actually made it so you can search by the registry path. Then you could filter further by something further down in the path, the value name or the value of the key, and then you can output that to a grid. So, and this is what I really get excited about when I talk about this, because what I ended up doing was creating my own sort of batch file analysis to be able to tell LogParser, hey, I want to search file systems at these root directories, and I'm going to output it to a CSV file called prefetch logs. Or I'm going to do this, call this the jump list.csv file. And then I want to search through event logs, and this is what I'm going to save them as. And then I'm going to do registry entries, and this is what I'm going to save each of my registry entries as. And then once I hit get script in, it drops all of this into a directory for me with a bunch of CSV files, and I can later go back and view them. I can combine them all if I want to. There's actually an option in here which I'm working on right now to create a master timeline. So if you want, under the options, you can click master timeline and drop everything out to a master timeline. And then this master timeline will automatically update as each of the queries are run. And then you can just sort by last access time for your file system. You can sort by your event log time, or you can sort by your last write time for your registry entry. And you will have a pretty good idea as to everything that happened on that system during that time frame. So I thought that was pretty cool. I was pretty excited about it, like I said, and I thought it was a really neat way to try to go through the files rather than dropping it into a comprehensive forensics tool to go through and do all the sort of data analysis and time analysis to put it in order and figure out what happened when. So I will say, though, it's LogParser is not without its limitations. I will say you still should do a image of the hard drive before you start doing this sort of analysis. If you're in a real big hurry, you can use it. You can use the tool, LogParser Studio, or this response tool to go through the system quickly. Just know that you're going to be changing some of the results, as I'm sure everybody knows that's listening to this. But it's still a good idea to make that forensics image of the hard drive before you start running these queries. It is a 32-bit DLL, so I had to create some workarounds in the VB.NET wrapper to deal with that. So there are some issues where it just kind of croaks when you're looking at some of the 64-bit file location issues, like the when event logs and stuff like that. You have to kind of change the environment variable, do a search and replace to try to get to the right event logs subdirectory. Some of the queries will not return a result for whatever reason. It'd be really neat if Microsoft updated this tool. I know they haven't really updated in quite some time, but I think it's partly due to just the limitations of being a 32-bit older DLL. But just as an example, if I run a query for the network list using LogParser, I get one hit, and that's it. And I should be getting all the subkeys, and I should be getting all the other information that goes along with it. So you can see here in the registry editor, network list should have a lot more child items in it. For whatever reason, it does not go down any further than network list. I tried a number of different ways to do that. I thought it was a 32-bit issue, and it turns out what I found out was that there are also a couple other glitches in there. The registry key, for example, will not return any results if the key itself is empty. So if you have a registry entry, but there's no subkeys or key values, it just skips over them. It thinks it's doing you a favor by skipping them. After all, why would anybody want to look at a registry key that's empty? But again, it wasn't necessarily planned to be a forensics tool, but I do think that it is a fantastic triage tool to use in a quick, down and dirty way to get through a system and figure out what happened at any particular point in time. And so that's my presentation over LogParser tool as a LogParser as a forensics tool. I have my contact information up there on the screen. I've got the GitHub where the intrusion lab, the wrapper is kept if you want to go out and try it, use it. If you just want to become proficient at a command line tool with LogParser, it's a great way to learn what the queries look like and how to run them. But again, it's just it's a great tool to have in your toolbox when you're going out there and trying to figure out what exactly happened to a system at a particular point in time. And with that, I'll open it up to questions to see if there are any. And like Ali said, if you have any questions, please just type them in the chat box.
Yep, awesome. Thank you so much, Bob. And yeah, definitely now is the time for questions. So get those in there. If you need to leave, just know we are going to be sending out the recording to this and all of his contact information in the links. So you can get them there. And in a little bit, I'll also send it in the chat as well. And again, if you have to leave, we are scheduling other webinars for May and July, so you can check those out at osdfcon.org/webinars, just as an FYI. And that's it. So let me head over there for a second. All right, first question. Have you used LogParser Lizard GUI?
I have. I have played around with it. I find it to be useful. I have found it to be, and this is just my opinion, it was a little bit more confusing than using LogParser Studio. I like LogParser Studio a little bit better, but same sort of things apply. It is a GUI. My understanding is a GUI for LogParser, and it's a great tool. So if you're comfortable with it and you use it, I would say go ahead and do that one. Use that one.
Cool. Does LogParser export a CSV?
Absolutely. So is my screen still up? Can I go backwards?
Yeah, it's still up.
So one of the things that you can do in this tool that I created, you'll notice down there it says to file. It'll dump it out to a CSV file. If you go back to LogParser Studio, you can drop it into this grid, and then you can copy it out of the grid if you want. It's very easy to do. And then LogParser itself, I'll just go back to this screen. LogParser itself outputs to all these different formats. You can drop it out to CSV, TSV, XML. You can drop it back out to syslog if you want. It's very, very versatile in terms of input and output.
Cool. Does the program need to be installed to run, or is it portable?
So if you use LogParser itself, or if you use LogParser Studio or LogParser Lizard, you do need to actually install it. One of the things that I wanted to do with this wrapper that I wrote was I wanted to be able to register the DLL without having to install LogParser itself. So you're not putting anything on the system. And so with LogParser and LogParser Studio, you have to install them. But with the VB.NET wrapper that's created, it will register that DLL for you at runtime, and then it unregisters that DLL when you're done with the program and close it out.
Cool. Somebody asked, can I contact you directly by mail? I'm assuming you mean email, because he has an error at install of Intrusion Response Lab.
Okay. Yep.
All right, cool. And does it have to run on the system under an investigation?
Say that again, please.
Does it have to run on the system under investigation?
Oh, yeah, it does. So LogParser itself, you can point it at event logs that have been pulled off a system. You can point it at a file system that is mounted in another directory. And so for the file systems, the event logs and that sort of thing, you don't have to run it necessarily directly on the system. But if you want to do the registry queries, you have to be able to run it directly on the system that you're investigating, because it's looking for those live registry hives in order to do its work. And without that, it won't see an offline registry hive.
Cool. Those are all the questions, with the exception of several people saying thank you very much. So Bob, I want to thank you so much for being here today and for taking the time to join us today for the audience.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Yep, and in the chat, I did post your email address as well as the GitHub link, so you guys can copy that if you have any questions or want to reach out. In terms of upcoming webinars, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we have one in May when Ali Hadi will be joining us to talk about Linux. And then in July, we actually have Jessica Hyde talking about Chromebook forensics. So you can register for those on either basistech.com/events or osdfcon.org/webinars. So I put those links in the chat so you can grab those. And that's it. Thank you again for joining us. Please take a minute to let us know what you loved or hated from the webinar so we can continue to give you some good content. And that's it. So stay healthy out there, and we hope to see you on the next one. Bye.